On the 24th February this year, the Russian army, under the orders of President Vladimir Putin, launched a war of aggression against a sovereign country that shares its western border with 4 countries of the EU and whose citizens live among us in Central Europe. This aggression of Ukraine was a real shock and aroused immense and protests, and at the same time, a lot of dissent everywhere. Like others, I was at first literally speechless. And we who make a profession of words, who devote ourselves to writing text, to prepare talks, it suddenly seemed to me that words suddenly lost all their value, no longer had any resonance. A missile can destroy a library and the lives of everyone in it in a second. But the missile is not just force, it's not just brutality. It is words that guide them. It is political narratives that set the tanks in motion. And these destructive narratives can be stopped by the tanks, by other tanks. They can also be countered by words, by other words. War is played out on all fronts, the military fronts, the sanitary fronts, the political one, the economic one, the cultural one, the diplomatic one, but it's also played out on the field of information, narration, and intelligibility. So we are therefore all concerned, and researchers in social sciences and humanities in particular. Of course, we are neither militants nor journalists. We are not political in a way, but we are aware of the historical moment we are living through, of the responsibility we have. It is the responsibility of each and every one of us to be as mobilized as possible in the place we occupy. So our mission as researchers in humanities, in social sciences, is to analyze, to provide intelligibility, to put things into perspective, to cross-check points of view, and to be as fair as possible, as close as possible to the truth. This is the meaning of these webinars for Ukraine, which I'm pleased to inaugurate today. As we know, war is a social total fact, to quote Marcel Mauss. War involves the strong stance of involving all the sectors of the societies directly concerned, the political, the military, again, the educational, the economical, the cultural, etc. And the war is driven by a logic of exclusion, but at the same time, it permits some dynamics of inclusion. It is a destructive crisis, but gives also some basis for constructive outputs. It is localized on a precise territory, which corresponds to the objectives, the martial objectives, more or less declared by the aggressor. But in fact, its geography is extensive. And I think the war in Ukraine contains all these characteristics. Its capacity to enlist, if only on a European scale, is obvious. And Central Europe, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, which is the region on which and within we are working here as CEFRES, Central Europe is in the front line from this point of view. Due to its geographical proximity, 3 countries in the region have common borders with Ukraine. Due to historical links these countries have with Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, its states, their states, and also their populations. And due also to the experience of communism and post-communism, this part of Europe is faced with many challenges in the context of the war. And in a way also we can say that the war holds a mirror, tend un miroir up to Central Europe. but also certainly to the entire Europe. So the principle of these seminars is therefore to analyze how Central Europe finds itself without being a co-belligerent, how it finds itself enlisted in the war, how it is involved by and in this war. So this first session will deal with one aspect of these processes, of this situation. And I warmly thank my CEFRES fellows, Michel Boussan, Ronan Hervouet, and Anemona Constantin, for having mobilized themselves to organize this seminar. And I thank also the team of CEFRES, Claire Madel, and the interns to have helped us in the preparation of this first meeting. I would like also to welcome our speakers from Prague or from Czech Republic, at least from Bratislava, and also she's going to join us a bit later from Poland. And I give the floor now to Michel Boussan.
I would like to welcome you all to this first webinar on Ukraine and the issue of refuge in Central and Eastern Europe. Faced with the current flow of information, knowledge and debate on the current war and the issue of refugees from Ukraine in their diversity, we thought it was imperative to give voice and to exchange with researchers from countries that host large numbers of these refugees and are on the doorstep of Ukraine and the conflict and in the front line to receive people who are fleeing the war today. So I will give now the floor to Vladimir, and my first question will be if you can give us some elements on the different refugees coming from Ukraine through the Slovakian borders.
I will start a little bit personally because I was a migrant originally. When I was about 10 years ago, when the allies of the Warsaw Pact entered with tanks to Czechoslovakia. So I had to flee with my father, who was a political prison, to Germany, Austria, Germany, Belgium, Iceland, Canada, and the US. So after my completing the studies, then when the conflict stopped, I returned back in 1971. But I'm particularly very sensitive to those issues since my childhood. Currently, I was a bit surprised that Slovakia and the other countries made a really welcome and trying to do the best. I was at the border 2 weeks ago. My deputies and the team is still on 3 hotspots. One is Vyšné Nemecké or Užhorod. The second one is Malé Slemenci from the Ukrainian border and Vyšné Slemence from Slovakia. It's only for pedestrians. And then the third group, the nurses are in Ubla, Velký Berezný. So I don't have data from the 4th hotspot, which is in Chop, which is for railway, but I have fresh data every day calling with my colleagues. Now, when I was there, I was pleased with the cooperation and the hospitality of the local people and the cooperation with the government, with the customs and the police. They didn't do the real check, and they were trying to get people as soon as possible through the border, which was not the case from the other side. Since the people there, what we get as for emergency health care were quite frozen and psychically collapsed because of waiting up to 30 hours. Now, then the situation changed. So when I was there, they were waiting only 12 to 16 hours. But anyhow, to wait at the queue with small children for the ladies was embarrassing, was tragic. When I was a child, we were never waiting such a time. So this was something what was disturbing us. But we were trying to do the first aid, and the great work was done by the Maltese Order. Since always it's some time when the government and the other structures are starting with the help, and so I was very pleased with that. And everybody was sheltered, get some food, and was transferred to the closest city in Michalovce, and the government made a railway and the buses for free and started to place those people. So going to concluding, the first question is that the response was surprisingly good. I mean, Slovakia was never faced with such a huge crisis, because the previous humanitarian crisis due to 2015, when I was in Budapest in the Keleti, where the Iraqi Syrian refugee staff was they were bypassing Czechoslovakia, especially Slovakia. So we were very pleased with the prompt response, and everybody was welcome. And so in my personal, I had 3 night duties at MUDr, and we had some acute cases from the medical point of view, but this is not a real medicine. I mean, those people were very, very tired, quite hungry, and very stressed. So this was the post-trauma stress syndrome was the commonest disease. And I, with my board of tropical diseases, had nothing to do with tropical or infectious diseases. Well, it was a very good news. So this was the first question. I'm sorry that maybe I did a long reply. Try to be shorter with the other ones.
It's perfect. It's okay. I would like to know also if concerning the profile of refugees, because for example, in the social networks, if I'm referring to what happened in Czech Republic, we have a lot of mention about women and children. And we have, for example, few mention of older adults, old people and men. And I would like to know if you have some information also concerning the profile of the current refugees from Ukraine.
Yes,
also
very correct. The first, yeah. Very correct. I mean, the first 3 days we have had everybody. Even 2 days we have had many foreign students from Kharkov and Kiev. So some of the politicians, they went at the border and they told, well, this is Africa coming, not Ukrainian children and women. But it was just 1 day, 1 or 2 days, and then they went transferred to Košice airport, and the country sent the aircrafts to evacuate them. So and it's correct what you mentioned, that 95% are now the women and children. The first 2 days, when there was no ban for travel for the males, we had seen all families. So on Thursday, I remember Thursday, Friday, we had complete families. What is very different from the Iraqi Syrian experience 7 years ago, we have seen very few old people, which is very logical, because I mean, to survive a 30-hour train or car drive from Kharkiv and from Kiev to the border, and then waiting, 14 hours in a queue. Normally the elderly, I will not survive that. So I understand they were young women and children, and they despite of the suffering, they were very, very brave, and they survived. So this is the reason why it was interesting that the first 2 days complete families, then students 2 days, and then since that time, since the first Sunday, we see 95% young families. I mean the young. The mothers and children. We have only one. Currently, we're serving 440 migrants here in Bratislava, housing them, and we have only one person. She's in pension. She's belonging to the senior group or elderly or whatever. And so the other 139 are mothers and children. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would like also to know if you can give us more information about what kind of actors, such as government, local authorities, NGOs, who are involved, and also what are their resources and capacities. You mentioned it at the beginning of your intervention, but if you are also more information, and also concerning not only the welcome now when they cross the border, but in the long time, how they manage, they think to manage such a flow.
Okay. Yeah, the long perspective. Yeah, I mean, we have had experience from. I mean, my first experience were refugees because we have a special team at the university. The tropic team has not only tropical team, but we have also the disaster medicine team. I mean, it doesn't mean that medicine is a disaster, but I mean medicine in disaster areas. So my first experience was the Romanian-Hungarian border in 89 when there was the collapse of the regime in Romania, and there was a one-way. It was interesting. It was very different because there was nobody escaping Romania, but there were many cars willing to enter with humanitarian help. So currently now, the first who was involved now was very similar, that the NGOs were willing to enter Ukraine. Yeah, first, it's normal. It's every refugee crisis. I've been in every hotspot until the government starts to mobilize their plans, resources. I mean, they have laws which they have to follow with getting the humanitarian help, with getting, I mean, different food and medications. It's just, it's normal that it takes 1 to 2 weeks. And Slovakia was very similar. So the Maltese Order, our university, the charity, then the civil society, Člověk v ohrození, Člověk v tísni. There are so many. They were all at the border. They were working. And we had the luck that the people were coming by small groups. I mean, family. And after 1 minute, another family. After 30 seconds, another family. So it was not like in Hegyeshalom where we get 27,000 people per day. Yeah. So you can do something with the people. So, and then you can easily get some capacities. So I think I was surprised. There was much less chaos I have seen in other similar situations. Of course, after 2 weeks, the government did very good things. They passed through the government and then through the parliament, the law, the special law, Lex Ukraine. And the Czech Republic did this even earlier than we. And so the children now can enter the schools. They can get social security. They were able from the day 2, they were able to travel for free. I mean, the government was very quick in some decisions. I mean, all the travel buses and public and the trains, so there was not a stock because they can leave Slovakia to other countries where they have relatives. And then the government then mobilized some resources. They started to do the tents. So I was really surprised that this, despite the 250,000 people crossed those 3 hotspots, and via the Vyšné Nemesto, where I had 3 duties, there were maybe 10,000 per day, but it was much better organized than I've seen either in Africa or in Iraq or in a Lebanese border or in other places.
And maybe a last question. I think you said at the beginning that you were surprised by the solidarity shown by Slovakian people, and I would like to know if you have some answer to this solidarity. According to you, why, especially from?
Yes, this is a very good question. I was surprised, still surprised. I don't know the really reason, because Slovakia was a bit isolated from all refugee crises. We were bypassed by the biggest one, where I was personally at the train station in Budapest, which was Keleti, was the first thing I have seen in the media. At that time, I was just returning from Cambodia, and I was sitting at the Kuala Lumpur airport in the lounge, and I have seen the news, and I was very, very surprised. I see a station what I know, and the similar thing was in Košice railway station, And I'm still a bit surprised because Slovakia was never faced with that, and the war generation died off. So they are my mother, she remembers the refugee situation after the Second World War very well. And I remember 1968. But since that time, so there is no real explanation. Maybe the first thing, what is maybe the reason is that Ukrainian people are very close to Slovak concerning the language. Second, that even during the Iraqi-Syrian crisis, Slovakia took about 200 migrants. So we were also active in the first crisis. Our team was working at Hegyeshalom, Miklós Háza, Nikolsdorf, and through this hotspot, we had 937,000 people through 3 months. This was the mainstream. But Slovakia was quite bypassed, so we had not such a problem as Hungary had or Austria. Yeah. And so maybe this was another reason that the people were very calm. They were very sad. They were very pessimistic, very depressed, but very quiet. Yeah. So there was nothing what you can see from many countries in Europe where the refugees and migrants are aggressive. Of course, I will be maybe also aggressive if I can't get any housing and so on when I'm in Dover or whatever you see. So another thing may be that still, unfortunately, there was some reservation against the people coming from Middle East because some politicians told there is an invasion against the Christianity and the Muslims are coming to overwhelm the Christian population in Slovakia, which is not true. I mean, we are not a Catholic university, St. Elisabeth. We are a Christian university with the European values, and the European values, if you serve to a Muslim or to a Hindu, I mean, we have a project with the Buddhists in Cambodia and with the Muslims in South Sudan, so without any major problems. But maybe this was the reason that most of them are Christians. And the last thing is that many Ukrainians were working in Slovakia, also in Czech Republic. They were known as good workers, as good people. Then during COVID, we have had 500,000 deaths in Central Europe, and in Slovakia 20,000 deaths. So many people died, and we have 70,000 free places for work. So there is no fear that those people from Ukraine are going to push our people out of the. And last thing was we had a visit of Pope. 3 months ago in Slovakia, and his majority was talking on migration and supporting the migrants and refugees. In that time, I mean, so maybe those 5 things together may play a role that everybody is not was welcome, but it's still welcome. This night we had maybe 100 people coming to our university. Complete the building of the rectorate is transferred for shelter. So we transferred all the classrooms for shelter. We transferred the rector's room for isolation unit for the COVID. We transferred the vice president's rooms for isolation for the nursing moms. We transferred the basement for stock of food. We transformed the entrances for cooking and preparing the food. So it's very easy. I mean, I think we still have capacity for like 50,000 people, because in Haiti, I remember when we came to Port-au-Prince, there was nothing left from the earthquake apart of schools. So we took the schools. We just invaded the schools, and we declared the schools as a humanitarian centers, as a healthcare units, and as a hospitals. So the same is done in Slovakia. In every town and village, most of the schools are involved, because in school you have a gym where a large amount of people can stay. Then you have a kitchen where you can cook for the people. You have toilets. You have a shower. You have a land. You have place for sports. So it's absolutely ideal place to welcoming the refugees and migrants. What will happen in the next 2 weeks? I'm not sure, because we were a bit lucky that the Czech Republic and Poland took really the huge amount of people. And most of the people were transiting through Slovakia. So we had, on the border, we have had 250,000 people. But of those, only 50,000, that's like 20%, stayed in Slovakia. All the rest, they went to Germany, France, UK, other countries. So this was the luck, and this is also maybe the reason why still everybody is welcome. I'm very sorry for this long explanation, but it's still hypothesis because everybody was surprised. I mean, also the government, the others, they were afraid that this will be a really crisis for the country. But the life is normal, and everybody's doing his best, and it's functioning.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So now I think I will give the floor to Ondřej.
Yeah, thank you, and bonjour à tous. Hello, everybody. Thank you for your invitation and for the floor. I'm happy to be with you, at least through the virus. Well, as I work as an analyst in STEM, I will be talking mostly about numbers, and I prepared a few notes on hopefully all the questions which we are supposed to debate today. So I don't have the first-hand experience as Mr. Vladimir, unfortunately, but I hope that at least even providing some insight from our previous research will be interesting and illustrative to the current situation, actually, how different it is. And also it might help us to identify why it is different from the previous migration waves. But also it can also raise or identify the challenges which are ahead, and which we currently are trying also to think through in our institute. So I will start maybe with the first question, which was mostly about the response to this unprecedented demand for hospitality. And again, I would start with few numbers. So around March 20th, there was more than 2 billion Czech crowns of donations given by the Czech citizens, which is unprecedented. And bear with, the numbers are not 100% up to date, because the situation is very dynamic and changing every day. And in the articles which I read, there was an additional about 2.5 billion Czech crowns of humanitarian but also military aid given or provided by the Czech government, and also other resources which are provided to people coming from Ukraine staying in the Czech Republic. So financially, I know that's, these are the hard data. Not always finance or money is the most important thing, but financially it's been the reaction has been unprecedented from the citizens as well as from the government. And I was trying to look into the past for some similar migrant wave, and I could find after the Balkans War in the 90s, there were about 6,000 refugees in the Czech Republic. Now, basically, according to the mobile providers, there are more than 270,000 refugees in the Czech Republic currently. So you can see how big difference this is. And I was checking the numbers regarding the asylums given last year, and it was 110. Not 1,000, but 110. And now the special visa, this special protection visa, was given to more than 200,000 in less than four weeks. So from these numbers, we can see that really the reaction is unprecedented, and I'm very happy that actually is positive. But now I would like to also to focus on some of the attitudes of the society from the previous waves, especially from 2015 and 16, when we could see a big many people coming, especially from the Middle East to Europe. And we can see that in Czech Republic, this raised a big resentment, and which also affected not only the attitudes towards migrants and migration, but also to the EU. And just to recall some numbers from the past, and which will be interesting later in the debate when we will compare them with the current numbers. For example, in 2016 and 15, only 20% of the Czech population was willing to help refugees. 71% still in 2018 was afraid of refugees. And almost half, 49% in 2016 of Czech population considered refugees staying in their village as a problem. So you can see that really from the previous experience from the 2015 and 16, really the attitudes were quite hostile to people, and not to migrants, but I'm again talking about refugees, so people really fleeing from war. And from our recent polls, which took place in autumn 2021, we could still see that actually 52%, so half of the population, was in favor of rejecting all migrants. So basically, regardless the region from which they are coming or reasons why they are coming. However, we could see that there were some factors that could decrease this resentment. And one of them was if the people who are coming are qualified. So in that case, 73% would be in favor of their acceptance in the Czech Republic. Or another factor was if they were from culturally closer countries. For example, Ukraine was one of them. Then in that case, 61% of the Czech population would be in favor. So we could see that there were some elements which could sort of mediate the resentment to migrants or to refugees. And maybe I would also mention what were the fears or why people were afraid. And this is maybe instructive for the future, what might be still ahead of us when this crisis will continue. People in the Czech Republic are mostly afraid that the people coming from abroad will abuse the social system, will take the work from the local people. Although it's true at this moment that the unemployment rate is low, people, especially people in unqualified jobs, are afraid of those who are coming, of foreigners who are coming, because these people are actually afraid that they might lose their jobs. So it's not that the entire society. We sometimes need to look also into inside of the society and focus on different groups. And of course, then there are fears of criminality and different traditions and culture and the unknown. This is also quite common for Czech society, which is very homogeneous and not very culture diverse. But I would like to conclude this question with the current numbers, and which actually underline the shift and the difference of the current situation, because now we have about 85% of Czech population who are in favor of reception of refugees from Ukraine. So basically we got from 35%, which is the normal level, to 85%. So that's very unprecedented. And again, 30% of Czechs declared that they would be willing to take a Ukrainian family to their home, which is again a big shift from just few months or years ago. And I know that in Poland it's even more. It's like 50% people are declaring that would be able or willing to do that. So this is regarding the sort of the comparison a little bit of how the situation now has changed. And now maybe just a few rather descriptions about how the actors like government, local authorities and NGOs react and work currently. I'm not such a big expert in this, and I don't have a first-hand experience. But besides the financial support, I think it's important to mention that the government reaction was quite swift and I would say positive, especially providing the registration and sort of like the legalize the people who come here, give the protection and the visas, which then, as it was already mentioned, guarantee to these people the other services like health insurance, but also accommodation, work, education for the kids. So I think in this regard, the reaction was again very quick, and I would say even well organized. And I would say that one of the factors why it was different from the previous waves was also the institute of this directive, EU directive providing temporary protection visa, which again makes it easier for the institutions to provide these special visas, and also for the people coming from the Ukraine, that they can then travel even out of the countries. They don't have to stay in the first country where they register. They can travel further on. So I think it's important also to underline the unprecedented instrument provided by the EU. Also, I would say that the role of the central government is mainly at this moment to provide the legal framework and to support to the regional and local municipalities, where I think that the main pressure sits at this moment, because these regions and local municipalities are those that need to basically deal with the people's needs. And there, I think there is the bottleneck. I'm aware that there are already some projects and programs which are being prepared on the level of ministries, which should support these local authorities and also NGOs in providing care to people coming from Ukraine. But I'm not really able to give more details. And maybe last point regarding this issue, I think it's important also to mention the citizens. As I already mentioned, 30% of Czechs are willing to take Ukraine people to their homes. There were also examples of people going to the borders with their cars and bringing people from the borders to the Czech Republic. Also, there are many volunteers in the crisis centers. So I think that the response really of the Czech Republic, of the Czech government, is again very positive. Regarding the reasons, maybe the third question, why this situation is so different from the previous migration waves. Some of them, and I would agree with all of the points which Mr. Krčméry already mentioned, and maybe just add to them that Czechs, I think an important role plays the historical experience of Czechs with the Soviet invasion in 1968. And I think that this means that even my generation, who was born 15 years after the invasion, still can identify with the situation of the people which are in experiencing invasion to their homeland by a Russian army. Also, I think that what plays an important role is that Czechs can understand the conflict. There was a lot of information even before the war started in the Czech media, and it's clear who is the aggressor. It's different situation than it was, for example, in the civil war in Syria, which is difficult for Czechs to understand what's going on. Here, it's basically much clearer. Also, the fact that 80% of the refugees are women and children and elderly plays a big role, because in the previous waves and in our surveys, we could see that Czech people are afraid of men as refugees, and also this is then creating this this fear of misuse of the social system and the feeling of economic migrants rather than war migrants. So, so this also plays a role. Also, the cultural background, which I think was also already mentioned, and the fact that the Ukraine was the largest minority in the Czech Republic, foreign minority. 170,000 Ukrainians lived in the Czech Republic before the war. It was even more than Slovaks. So already Czechs have experience with these people. And the last, maybe in the last point, regarding the contours of the solidarity shown in the Czech Republic, maybe here I would like to talk a little bit about the challenges, what is ahead of us, because at this moment we are still in the phase of shock, which provides a lot of enthusiasm, emotions, people want to help. But again, we should not forget that the migration remains a sensitive topic. As I mentioned, in the real time, or sort of like normal time, the support for the reception of migrants is around 35%. At this moment, we are around 85% to 90%, and it's likely that this support will start to decline, and we need to be prepared for that. Also, there will be the impacts of the war will be felt also in the Czech Republic. I'm now talking about the increasing energy and fuel prices, and of course, people, the vulnerable groups in the Czech Republic might start feeling that who will take care of them. And we could already see it on social medias or somewhere. You know, it's not massive, but we can already here and there see these outcries, and we could already hear it from some of the politicians, from the oppositions who start playing this card. And it's likely that the issue of support to Ukrainians will become a political issue as any other, and the unity of the political scene, which we can see now, will probably will not last for much longer, and it will become an issue of a political battle. This will probably happen also with the role of the EU and NATO, which some Czechs can see as inefficient or unuseful. And again, this will be a challenge for the government, sort of like to provide the position and role that still Czech Republic has an important voice in the EU, and sort of like do not just keep that in mind, and show that EU and NATO still can play an important role. And the last point maybe is the disinformation, which is still quite a big threat at this moment. Some of the webs were cancelled, of the disinformation webs, but we can expect that and we can already see that there are disinformation around the support for Ukraine refugees in the Czech Republic already circling, and we should be there strategies how to cope with them. And I think that we need to be prepared for the disinformation scene to sort of again try to steer the Russian propaganda, and this will again sort of undermine the role of the government, and that the government knows what the government is doing, that the support is transparent. So this is something what the government probably needs to keep, and if the government will be successful in this, then probably we can avoid some of the declines in the support for the people from Ukraine currently staying in the Czech Republic. So I'm sorry, I was probably a little bit longer than expected. But at this moment, that's all I have prepared for these initial notes, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I will give the floor to Anemona.
So thank you very much for having organized this roundtable and for giving me the opportunity to speak about the situation in Romania. I would first say that I feel myself a bit as an outsider since I'm living now in Prague and I'm not there, even though I'm following the Romanian press and I speak daily with people that are witnessing the situation in Romania. And before speaking about the situation of the Ukrainian refugees who are fleeing to Romania, I would like to present some maybe geographical and historical data in order to put a light on the relations between Ukraine and Romania. So I thought it might be useful to prepare some maps. Since 1991 and the independence of the Ukraine, Romania is sharing two borders with Ukraine, one in the northern part, as you may see, and one in the eastern part, as you may not. And one in the eastern part, I'm talking about the narrow strip of land between the Black Sea and the Republic of Moldova. It is the largest border. Romania is sharing with another country dotted with 20 border posts. It's covering 649 kilometers. But as we are speaking about the Ukrainian, the relationship between Romania and Ukraine, I will maybe recall some historical events. In the 1940 and 41, as a result of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, Romania lost several territories which were incorporated to the Soviet Union. These territories are the northern part of Bukovina, Bessarabia, and the Herza region. The northern Bukovina-Herza region, the northern and southern Bessarabia became part of the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, while the middle part of Bessarabia and Transnistria became part of the Moldavian Soviet Republic. In 1991 and the independence of Ukraine and these borders were confirmed. And in 1997, in the context of Romania accession to NATO, the two countries signed a bilateral treaties that resolve the minority and territorial issues, especially the dispute over the Snake Island. I will discuss later this issue, and the dispute between Romania and Ukraine over the construction of Bystroe Canal. So over the past few years, these relations, here you have the map with the territory Romanian lost during the Second World War. And here the map with the present situation. So over the past few years, these relations between Romania and Ukraine could be characterized as being tense due to significant disagreements over the several issues. First one concerns the Snake Island. And this continental shelf of the Black Sea, under which we find significant gas and oil deposits. After 1991, Romania and Ukraine tried to find a settlement, but in 2004, after the integration of Romania in NATO, the Romanian side brought the case against Ukraine to the International Court of Justice. which decided in 2009 that Romania has sovereign jurisdiction over an area of 9,700 square kilometers, approximately 80% of the disputed area, and the rest was going to Ukraine. Another issue between Ukraine and Romania concerns the minorities. 61,000 Ukrainians are living in Romania today, I mean before the refugees crisis, and 151,000 Romanians are living in Ukraine. But the Romania and Ukraine cannot agree over the issue of the Moldovan national minority because Kiev sees them as a distinct minority group, while Bucharest believes that Bessarabian Romanians are still Romanians. And is stating that over 400,000 ethnic Romanians are living in Ukraine. So that would be another issue. Romania condemns Ukraine of pursuing a too aggressive policy of cultural assimilation. And Ukraine is doing the same for accusing Romania of bad treatment towards the Ukrainian minority. Concerning the Bistroe Canal, we can say that this is the Serbian island, yes. And concerning the Bistroe Canal, we can see that the two countries act as economic competitors here. But despite of all these issues, Romania backed Ukraine in its effort to establish closer relations with the EU and with NATO. That is a bit the historical background of the relationship of the relations between Ukraine and Romania. We see that they are tense today. That's why it's very surprising the hosting of the Ukrainian refugees in Romania during the crisis. Here you have a map with the border points. So the refugees are entering today Romania, especially through two main channels. In the eastern part, they enter through a border post called Disaccha, and in the northern part, through the border post for road and rail traffic. Also, they have the possibility to enter Romania through the Republic of Moldova. So since the beginning of the crisis, 2.6 million people left Ukraine. Most of them choose Poland as their final destinations. 450,000 people arrived in Romania, but the majority were in transit. And till today, around 75,000 remained in Romania, fewer than in Republic of Moldova. And among them, we are finding almost 30,000 children. The Romanian government says that children are the top priority, are in the top priority list in terms of intervention by the Romanian state. The refugees that are arriving to Romania are mostly mothers with children and elderly people. We don't have, I didn't found the data concerning their education, social and professional background yet. As for the main actors who are active in receiving the refugees are the Romanian authorities, the Romanian state. I have to say that the Romanian state reacted a bit late and only after being pressured by the NGO, especially by the ones which are mobilized at the borders. So we have the also the municipality of some cities in Romania, as the municipality of the city of the Brașov town, which we find a big center for refugees. CNN came and took some images and transmitted the live documentary on this big refugee center, and also some institutions like the universities, especially the Faculty of Political Science from Bucharest, which became a major hub for hosting refugees according to UN. So they are providing accommodation, networking. They created a web platforms, scholarship for students, and also job opportunities for the professor and researchers, Ukrainian professor and researchers who want to evolve in the education of the Ukrainian students coming to Romania. Also support through the Mosaic, which is an association for LGBT people, and organized several debates with specialists that want to clarify the situation in Ukraine. Among the other actors that are involved, we are counting the range of NGOs, the international one, like the big ones like UNICEF, la Croix-Rouge, the UN Refugees Agency in Romania, but also smaller local NGOs. I put the list that I found here. Maybe it's important after brief research, I noticed that the local NGOs unfolded in Romania, the local NGOs which are hosting the refugees, unfolded in Romania after three main events. Maybe it's an interesting point. After 2015, one of this event was the strong mobilization against the exploitation of gold mines from Roșia Montana, and the mobilization against the government and the Canadian company, which is called the Gold Corporations. The second event was the overthrow of the Romanian government in 2015 after the fire of the collective club, which made around 60 victims. And the third was the COVID crisis. So we see these lots of associations and NGOs which were created during the events, now very much involved in the hosting the Ukrainian refugees. They are created by young people, and they are engaging with issues concerning democratization, anti-corruption, elections, and less frequently social assistance, social problems, or medical assistance. Also concerning the forms of aid and solidarity that they are providing, the Romanian state simplified the procedure, visa delivering procedures, following the requirements of the European Union, opened 6 asylum centers and 13 mobile accommodation camps. I put the numbers here. Is giving also an allowance of €5 per day temporary medical insurance. Created also a task force for unaccompanied children, and an information platform. But those who are the most involved in this crisis are the field actors, like the travel companies, a lot of volunteers and ordinary citizens, which are offering accommodation, food supplies, free transportations, also facilities and jobs, special assistance also for pets, and free psychological support. What is among the difficulties, maybe we already speak about the racial discrimination towards non-Ukrainians. Some of them have experienced bad treatment at the borders, but also in Romania. I read some articles about Indian and African citizens, also about some Rome citizens which were arrested at the North Station in Bucharest. I have to say that the NGOs are mobilizing and receiving the Ukrainian citizens, but some NGOs notice the situations and are offering priority to the non-Ukrainian refugees. In Bucharest, especially in the neighborhood of Corbanca, some travel agency which is open in priority to the non-Ukrainian citizens. They are facing also bureaucratic difficulties in obtaining the documents. There have been some problems caused by due to the lack of partnership between the state and the civil society, and we already underlined the risk of human trafficking and sex abuses at the borders. These forms of solidarity, of course, as we said, for Slovakia, are very moving, given that in Romania the topic of refugees was received with indifference and reluctance by the society when during the migrant crisis in 2015, we have to recall that the Romanian president refused the quota imposed by the European Union, and Romania received only 5,000 refugees from Middle East. They feared also terrorist attacks, and the main conservative intellectuals spoke against the hosting of migrants from Middle East. So now we are very surprised by the very warm wave of solidarity, and maybe as among the motivations of these forms of identification, I would say, with the Ukrainians, I would underline the Orthodox religion. Romania, it's an Orthodox country as Ukraine. So we are talking about people like us very much. The Russophobia, for sure, with the historical roots that I talked about. The common communist past also, and the fact that we fear to return to the Soviet occupation, the geographical proximity, and I would say the pro-Western values and attitudes. We don't have to forget that the NGOs which are the most involved in hosting the Ukrainian refugees are being run by young people, very pro-Western ideas and attitudes. Maybe it's also an explanation. And here I would like to share with you some narratives and reactions to the refugees coming from Ukraine. Of course, there are a lot of sympathy, empathy reactions based on a strong identification, I would say, and on Russophobia. But also we have some reaction against Ukraine and the refugees that are instrumentalizing and using the arguments of the occupation of the Romanian territories during the Second World War, and the fact that, as I said before, the borders are contested today, but by some Romanian politicians, nationalist historians. Also, the problem, this issue of the attitude of Ukrainian authorities towards the Romanian minority, the class differences between refugees. I saw some articles emphasizing that the Ukrainian refugees are being rich. Their wealth constitutes a problem. The classic argument, what about our own economic problems, our own children and abandoned children, our own poor people? And also we have some radical narratives coming from the new left, which are considering that NATO and EU is responsible for the crisis. They work with very classist readings of the war, considering that the poor people, the war is carried out by the poor people to protect the assets of the rich. And they consider that Zelensky is a media product and that Ukraine should accept Russian influence. And on the other side, we have the pro-Putin attitudes coming from ex-nomenclatura members and their heirs, or also from some nationalists, politicians and intellectuals, which are considering, some of them are considering the war as a fake news. And the result of an agreement between Putin and the Western democracies, and some others consider that we should ally with Russia. And I will maybe stop here.
I will give the floor to Olena Babakova.
First of all, dear colleagues, many thanks for your invitation to be a speaker of this event. And please excuse me for my delay, because we had an emergency meeting in office related to some issues we are discussing today. I hadn't a chance to prepare a presentation as a previous speaker, so I would try to present my main points shortly, smoothly, and give you more time for questions and probably some discussion about my reference points. So I'm a journalist. I'm not a migration researcher as by myself. However, I'm a person who tries to popularize objective knowledge about migration, both labor one and asylum seeking in Central East European countries and Poland particularly. Before February 24th, 2022, Poland already had an almost 1 million people Ukrainian diaspora, which started to live in this country, in Poland, just during the last decade. When we track the statistics back in early 2010s, we could observe that at that time Poland was a very clearly emigration country. So most of the talks about migration, asylum seeking, about international movement of people, it was a story about Poles who find their safe shelter or who find their jobs in the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Norway, or Germany, one of the biggest Polish neighbors and actually one of the biggest European economies. So the story about immigration, it was the story of people who left this country. The fact of discussing something like somebody could come to Poland to find a place to live here or find a shelter here, it was like a very marginal issue for journalists and migration researchers, and something which was interesting for press maybe like once a year. However, situation started to change in 2015. After annexation of Crimea by Russia and after the war in Donbass have started, a lot of Ukrainians, pushed not so much by the war actions, but mostly by economic crisis, which affected Ukraine in 2015, they decided to find their workplaces abroad. Of course, we already observed a large movement of people from Ukraine to Western European countries in the 90s, mostly to Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Greece. In these countries, we still have a very large Ukrainian diaspora. However, that immigration was immigration with very women face, mostly from Western Ukraine, and mostly of people who agreed to perform low-skilled jobs. And mostly of people who at least declared at the very beginning that their aim is just to earn some money for their children, for their grandparents, and come back home. However, the biggest destination for Ukrainian labor immigration at that time, it still was Russia. After 2015, a lot of Ukrainians found for themselves simply impossible to go work to Russia, cause of political and related moral reasons, but at the same time, cause of ruble course collapse. It became simply unprofitable to earn money in rubles and to spend them at home. At the same time, we observe the process where a lot of Central European countries, which along with Poland before were perceived as mostly emigration countries, started to face, on the one hand, a demographic crisis, I mean low fertility rates and rapid process of eldering of population, and at the same time started to record industrial growth and record low unemployment rates. So Poland liberalized its migration law much, even a little bit early in 2013, which enabled those Ukrainians who found that they need to work for a job abroad to try themselves at Polish labor market. So government, actually not even Law and Justice, but previous civic platform government, made the legal fundament, I mean this new foreigners law from 2013. Polish business performed their job in terms of attracting this Ukrainian labor force. For instance, in 2016, I visited a hometown of my grandparents, Konstantinivka. It's a Donetsk region. It's a part which is controlled by Ukraine. And from this city, most of the people haven't been abroad, never. However, at the tram stop in 2016, then I found an announcement written by a Polish mining company that it is recruiting people who want to work in Silesia region. So it was a revolution. Not only people from Western and Central Ukraine, but also people from Eastern and Southern one, they started to work in Poland. And if the mark of 100,000 holders of living permit was crossed in 2018, today we have more than 350,000 Ukrainians who hold living permits in Poland, and whom we could call long and mid-term immigrants, so people who decided to move the center of their life and activities to the other country. Along with these 350,000, we have almost 800,000 people who could be considered as short-term, seasonal, or circular migrants. These are people who actively use Polish know-how, the procedure which is called oświadczenie. In English, it is declaration of employer to give the work to third country national. As you know, if you're a third country national and you want to work in the EU, you need to obtain work permit, which is quite a complicated procedure in every member state, especially in Western and Northern Europe. However, in 2007, Polish government, after the big lobbying campaign of Polish business, decided that the set of nationals of Eastern Partnership countries and Russia, they deserve to be employed using the framework of simplified procedure of this declaration. So you do not need to obtain the permit, so to pass an administrative procedure in which you could be refused. However, you simply need to declare that you want to give a job to a foreigner for the selected countries. This procedure is quite quick. Instead of half a year, this is a period you usually apply for a work permit. Declaration could be registered in Warsaw in months, in some regions where you have less foreigners, so shorter lines, you need like 3 or 4 days. If you will combine this factor with the fact that Ukraine obtained a visa-free movement with the EU in 2017, And Polish legislation lets Ukrainians to combine visa-free movement with obtainment of this declaration. So you could work legally when visa-free in Poland. You could see that this record growth of number of Ukrainian workers who have Poland as target country, not Western European countries, how it was in 90s. It was constantly growing till the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic itself is actually a separate interesting topic which we could discuss. It changed a bit the dynamics of growing of Ukrainian immigration for a couple of months at the very beginning of the pandemic. However, after Polish government issued a law which led almost all categories of Ukrainian workers and students to cross the border without major complications, this process of growth, we could observe it again. So before February 24th, we already had more than a million. Actually, we have different estimations. Some researchers says about a million. The highest estimation I found, it's 1.5 million. However, I think it's actually it's too big, and it's rather a joint number of all Ukrainians who stay in the country, transfer through the country, and cross the border during some selected quarter. The million sounds more realistic to me. Who already stayed in Poland. Why it's important? And actually, it would be my second point. As we know from different international studies related not only to Europe, but also to Africa and Asia, the most important driver of unregulated migration and also asylum seeking, we include into unregulated migration, for these people do not obtain visas or living permit. It's the presence of national or local diasporas in the target country. It's simple. When people live in their homes, they are stressed and they feel they're very limited or even lack of resources to settle in the new life. They want to be close to somebody who they already know, their relatives, their friends, or at least representatives of their home cities, of their local communities. So naturally, people choose to stay in the country and people choose to come to the country where they have somebody of theirs. So when we observed the situation at the Polish-Ukrainian border during the very first days after Russian invasion started, we saw that most of the people who crossed Polish-Ukrainian border on February 24, February 25, and February 26, these people were automatically picked up from the border by somebody. They are Ukrainian neighbors, they are Ukrainian family members. So they came to Poland already with some contacts and some at least little plan how to perform during the next days or even during the next weeks. Today, as of March 22nd, we know that more than 2 million people from Ukraine crossed the border with Poland starting from February 24th. According to the estimations of different migration researchers from Warsaw University and then from Krakow Economic University, 1/3 of these people already left. And approximately 15 to 20% of these people will leave during the closest weeks. Those who already left and those who will leave, they're mostly people who already have some contacts, I mean relatives, friends, or labor contacts in Europe. First of all, in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal, in Germany. Of course, some people try to join their family in Britain, in States, and Canada. However, these countries are not visa-free for Ukrainians, so the trip there could take some time. At least visa issuing process could take even some months. Today in the American consulate in Warsaw, we have a line for more than 3 months if you want to apply for a visa to join your family in the States. Anyway, today it looks like that on the territory of Poland, I will remind you the state which has nearly 37 million inhabitants, we could assume that 2, maybe even 2.5 million of Ukrainian citizens stay here. 1 million, or maybe a little bit less, I will explain it later, as labor migrants, and more than 1 million as refugees. So it's important to fix. Which factors, to my mind, influence the Polish people attitude to Ukrainian immigration today? First of all, it's the fact that, as I said, Poland just started to get to use with the role of not just immigration, but the role of recipient countries. So, some way, this immigration and recipient policy is still a little bit new. Maybe not so much for Polish business and society, but still a little bit new for Polish government. The second big factor, it's Polish reactions to EU migration crisis of 2015. As you probably remember, thanks to Polish efforts, as well as other Visegrad countries, the EU relocation mechanism, which was designed to help Germany and other recipient countries at the time, it was in fact cancelled and was never implemented. The third factor is Polish own migration crisis, which is rather the border crisis and migration one of 2021. And I mean the situation at Polish-Belarus border, which from the point of view of Polish government and some mass media is a special operation designed by Putin and Lukashenko. And as it perceived by Polish human rights protectors and Polish NGO, it's a humanitarian crisis, which was caused by cynical attitude of Polish authorities to people with a different skin color who would like to find safe shelter in the EU. I guess among the factors which influence today's attitude to Ukrainian asylum seekers is also the legacy of Polish thinkers of 20th century, I mean Paris Kultura magazine, and works of Giedroyc and Mirashevsky, who always stressed the importance of independent Ukrainian and protection of Ukrainian independence for Polish independence itself. Its legacy of former President Lech Kaczynski and his famous speech in Tbilisi that today Georgia, tomorrow Ukraine, but the day after tomorrow it could be Poland and Central Europe. And I think actually maybe this factor is not so obvious. However, to my mind, it's very important in maybe not practical, however, psychological dimension. It's Poland's own history, and it's the history of 1939. When Poland was attacked simultaneously, firstly by Nazi Germany and next by Soviet Union. And despite of having an alliance with France and United Kingdom, it was basically betrayed by its Western allies and was forced to fight alone with two totalitarianisms. So all these factors, along with the fact that during the last 5-6 years, Poles were quite used to live to along 1 million of their Ukrainian neighbors, it concluded in a very, I think, heartwarming and very inspiring situation when during the first weeks after the Russian invasion, basically, Polish government I don't want to use this term, however, it seems proper in this time. It outsourced most of the work with refugees reception, most of the work with refugees housing, transportation, food and medical care, not to central government, not to local governments, but to Polish citizens and general Polish inhabitants. It's a very generous and very heartwarming actions of Polish civil society. And I mean, people who came to border and who offered housing, who offered transportation to Polish or even to Western European cities. People who served as information points about what are your rights in the European Union, how you could help your children to sign to school, can you continue your studies at Polish university and something like that. Because finding a self-shelter after crossing the border, it's one thing, but knowing about your rights and knowing about your perspectives, making your future at least a little bit predictable. It's so important for a person who just escaped the war that I cannot even describe it. So we really were, and actually we really are the witnesses of a great act of Polish solidarity. So if we could grade the efforts of different institutions and different subjects in resolving this refugee crisis, I think that Polish civil society deserves A+. However, not all the other institutions deserve the same high grade. if I would estimate, because we almost have, it's scary to say that, but we almost have 4 weeks of the war, and we almost have this 4 weeks of refugee crisis. If I should estimate, I think that 80% of the work performed to help the refugees to settle in Poland or come further for Western Europe, to deal with their problems, I mean, both juridical one and logistical one, 90% of work is done by Polish society, and by Polish society, I mean not only Polish citizens. Friends of mine with Belarusian passports, with Russian passports, even people from Syria and Afghanistan who managed to receive asylum in Poland today, they volunteer on Polish and Ukrainian border and offer their help. 15%, along with 80%, is performed by Polish NGOs. And here, on the one hand, we have quite developed structures of NGOs which used to work with immigrants, both labor one and asylum seekers. I mean, so large and established initiatives like Polska Akcja Humanitarna, Polish Humanitarian Action, or Caritas Polska, Christian organization which gives help to people from Poland and outside. I mean local NGOs like Homofaber from Lublin, like Ukraiński Dom, Ukrainian House from Warsaw, like Fundacja Ukraina from Wrocław. They organized a true informational center which operate like a database of housing facilities, information telephone and internet line, which general consultations about your perspectives to stay in Poland, which formal regularities you need to obey, something like that. This foundation, they also perform as hubs to gather humanitarian aid and to transfer it to Ukraine or to Polish-Ukrainian border. At the same time, you have dozens of NGOs which were not used to work with immigrants themselves. However, they are specialized in resolving some very particular social problems. For instance, work with children with autism spectrum diseases. Because families with such kind of children, they cannot stay within the general reception centers, because in such circumstances, the physical and mental conditions of these children rapidly become worse. And they really need special assistance, not only individual housing, but also therapy, living close to the therapy centers. As far as I know, a great job is done by Polish foundation, which are used to work with people with oncology diseases, because they need expensive monitoring, they need expensive tests, sometimes they need a very special care, also special housing facilities, so it's going on. Along with that, you have a lot of uninstitutionalized citizenship institutions. A lot of people would like to volunteer, like volunteers at reception centers, volunteers at railway stations in Krakow and Wrocław and Warsaw and Gdańsk, because basically today these big railway stations become the, maybe not the first, because the first at the border, but the second and important reception points for those who would like to spend in Poland at least a couple of days. The biggest problem I see today, it's that the process of gathering the information and creating a database of these initiatives and these NGOs working with refugees hadn't even started. So we know that a lot of people is doing a lot of good stuff. However, we are often unable to point out particularly who works in which city and who does what. That is why sometimes we have more volunteers more than needed at some point who offer their help in serving warm food for refugees. But at the same time, we have not a sufficient number of people who speak Russian and Ukrainian and who could explain parents how they should organize the school teaching for their children. So here, I think that the biggest demand is actually some organization, some international organization, some governmental authority who will simply gather the information, create a database, and disseminate this information through government authorities and through civil society initiatives. 80% plus 15, 4% is done by Polish local governments. The discussions about the possible Russian military large-scale invasion, they started, actually we had the first wave in April last year, but the second wave, it started in the late 2021. Thanks to US and the British intelligence messages, most of the European governments had a chance at least to start to prepare to the possible development of events. In Poland, which is a border country, so naturally will and would become the first border crossing point and the first reception point for the biggest part of Ukrainian refugees, the discussion started just 10 days before invasion. It was the Minister of Interior, Mariusz Kamiński, addressed to voivodas to count the housing facilities and to count the sleeping places, so how much people each voivodeship could host. Voivodas quickly transferred this request to representatives of local governments. As far as I know, before February 24th, less than 20% of local governments managed to address this inquiry. There were no discussion about food facilities. There were no discussion about teaching facilities for children. There were no discussion about the possible changes to legislation. And here is, I think it's a good point to stress. Regardless of the really unprecedented growth of immigration flows, during the last 6 years, Poland has no immigration policy. I mean, no official governmental document which describes and states which type of migrants come to our country, how we should perform with labor migrants, how we should perform with asylum seekers, which type of integration activities should we launch, how much should it cost, how many people could we host, how many people in emergency circumstances would be host, who is responsible for work with these people, which budget reserves could be used in emergency situations, something like that. We had such kind of document in 2013, 2015. However, it was put to the trash basket by the new Law and Justice government just like a couple of months after coming to power in 2015. So when the war started, Polish government was clearly unprepared to it, both in juridical and both in logistical terms of view. As I said, it was much rescued by the general efforts of Polish civil society. However, as we see today, these efforts are not enough. They are not enough because of objective reasons, because today we have not tens of thousands, but more than 1 million refugees. It is. Okay. Excuse me, do you have some questions?
Maybe because we are running out of time. I'm sorry.
Okay, so just 2 minutes. Okay.
Yes, maybe if we want to have some question or to discuss a little bit, it's
sure. Once again, I'm very sorry for my delay. So I understand the limits of time. So just 2 minutes to conclude. And actually, it's a good first point for conclusion that despite Polish civil society performs really great, the government cannot pass all most of the public task on the shoulder of its own citizens. It's unjust, it's the first point. And actually, it's unproductive because people simply cannot be enthusiastic during months and months, and in the perspective of this conflict. Even if Russia and Ukraine will sign any ceasefire tomorrow, we still have Kharkiv, Irpin, Bucha, Izum, Mariupol almost completely destroyed in terms of hundreds of facilities. So it means that thousands of people from there, they simply cannot come back to their homes, even in case of ceasefire. What other key problems and what other challenges could we identify as seen from today? To my mind, the first point is legislation. Despite Poland is one of the first countries which started to implement the European Council directive and already agree and already voted for the law which describes how to act in this situation. Poland introduced the category of temporary protection for Ukrainian refugees, describe the possibilities of Ukrainian children to go to school and Ukrainian students to continue their studies. However, this law doesn't include the category of those Ukrainian citizens who did not come directly to Poland, but who passed to Poland through Slovakia, Hungary, or Romania. These people are excluded from this law. The same is the situation of the third countries' nationals. Only the spouses of Ukrainian citizens are covered by this temporary protection. All the other third country citizens, including Belarusians, who escaped Belarus in 2020 after Belarusian totalitarian regime repressed the protesters and who just found a safe shelter in Ukraine, they were pushed to leave their houses second time in just a couple of years once again. And today they cannot count for temporary protection in Poland. The same situation of Russian opposition, which escaped Russia to Ukraine after 2014. These people are clear critics of Putin's regime, and they were critically endangered in case of Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the same is the situation, for instance, of Syrian and Afghan students who were enrolled into Ukrainian university programs, especially in Kharkiv, which is a great education center for English-speaking students. Second problem is the capacity to implement this law. In this law, we have quite a large information about what Ukrainian refugees are able to do, but we have quite limited information who is responsible to make these promises real. We already see great tensions between voivodas and local governments, who should finance this and that activities. We already see that central government is tend to spend rather limited budget money for integration activities. So the issue of capacity. The third issue is that during these 5-6 years, when diaspora communities in Poland were growing, non-governmental organizations alarmed that Poland, when hosting a number of labor migrants, do not implement any integration activities. So a lot of people of actually high integration capacity came, and you could start at least a test program to see how it works, which type of activities could be performed, what are the needs of these communities, how we could include these people into public discussion, into civil society. This chance was lost. Polish government did nothing. And I could say even more, sometimes it interrupted civil society in these integration projects. So today, when more than people of lower integration capacity came, lower because these people cannot join labor market so quickly. Elderly people, they could not be enrolled in the language courses so quickly. And I think that a lot of people in such came in such kind of psychological conditions that they simply could not be enrolled in such kind of the programs because of moral reasons. So, but we have no integration track, we have no strategies tested. Fourth point, housing. Poland is one of the EU's outsider in terms of the square of living facilities for every inhabitant. So Poles themselves suffered because of housing problems during the last decade. There is not enough numbers of good housing facilities even for Polish youth and for Polish people who came from villages to towns and to cities. We already see that Warsaw, Krakow, Wrocław, and Gdańsk, they are simply not able to house Ukrainian refugees. And because Poland didn't want to participate in this 2015 relocation programs, there are no established mechanism of transferring people from big cities to villages and to small town facilities. So how it works. Fifth point, labor market. This temporary protection law, it gives those Ukrainians who are undercovered by this law the possibility to work in Poland without additional work permits, which is actually quite good. However, we still need to think how much people will use this opportunity. Is it an opportunity of single mothers with 4 children? Is it opportunity for people 70 plus? Is it opportunity from people who escaped really hard missiles attack and who spent 2 weeks in their building basement struggling for their life? I'm not sure that simply let these people to enter the job market without any conditions is just a solution. So this free access to labor market, which actually some way worked as integration mechanism for labor migrants during the previous years. Today, I'm afraid it will not work this way without additional efforts. And the last but not least point, it's information warfare, Russian propaganda, and Russian informational malign activities we already observe. First of all, to make Poles doubting about the reason to host Ukrainians. And here we see this all crazy social media story that somebody's cousin came to city council, wanted to sign some list of a paper, but she was not able because it was so much Ukrainians, and city authorities said that for them Ukrainians are the priority and they have no room for Poles, not today, not in a month. Such kind of stupid stories, anonymous, without any confirmation like photo, video, or like voice recording, they spread in the social networks like fire in the hot weather. So at the same time, there is a massive Russian disinformation campaign against Poles. You probably saw this Dmitry Medvedev, I don't know how we should call it, essay, article about the bad Poles and how they spoil their neighbors in Ukraine and Belarus. But we have more of that stuff. And along with, it will be my conclusion. So, along with helping Ukrainians and along with integration activities and explaining Ukrainians their rights, their possibilities, and making them members of Polish society, we definitely need an integration and education track for Polish society. Why their neighbors came to their country, what are the rights of these neighbors, in which circumstances these people came, how tensions in Polish-Ukrainian past could affect the situation. So we still have a large work ahead. And as I said, if civil society performs A+, Polish government, I think, as of today, deserves probably C.
There is some questions. The first one is for Vladimir about his opinion on Kotleba's party, declaring that African migrants are taking advantage of the crisis to cross the EU borders through Slovakia.
It's very simple. It's very simple because this was only 2 days, unless the students escaped. Well, they were all students, and they had a valid visa for Ukraine, and we have not seen any economical migrants. I mean, the checkpoint, they were 2 checkpoints, and the people were coming smoothly. It was not like 7 years ago what I have seen in Hegyeshalom, where 27,000 people came in several waves. The smallest wave was 3,000. Now everybody came very, very slowly, smooth and organized, and they went all going to Košice for the airport. The countries like India and Nigeria and others in Egypt, and I have a good data because I was testing those guys for COVID. Yeah, I was testing them. It was time to test, so there was no fear that they are coming economical migrants from. Well, of course, always can happen something. But it's not the real. It's not a real fear. Thank you.
So thank you very much. The question would be perhaps to all of you, and thank you so much for me from Media and Arts. It's a very informative panel. What do you think is the perspective of the situation? Actually, we are addressing sort of the detail of the acute situation, the response of each countries. But I keep wondering, as a citizen and artist, what do you think is sort of like a sentiment, like how it's gonna evolve? Like, what is the snapshot of a perspective of this horrible crisis and war? Thank you.
What I think, what I've seen in other places is the first people are always going to the places with the best possibilities. It's like Germany, France, UK. It's normal. You can see it in Czech Republic, where most of the people crossing Slovakia stayed in Czech Republic. I mean, from the 250,000, going through Slovakia. The 200,000 stay in Czech Republic, only 50,000 stay in Slovakia. So I mean, the next step will be, there will be more, and I mean, those countries in Western Europe and Central Europe with the higher incomes will be saturated. So I mean, the real difficult situation will be Poland, Slovakia, and Romania. And Romania especially, I was very pleased with the presentation. Thank you so much. And also to the colleague from Czech Republic who gave exact data and the feeling. I learned a lot of good data, and I'm very happy that you invited me. So thank you so much. And what finally I would like to tell that Romania will have a problem also with those who will be special kind of refugees or displaced via Moldova. In Moldova, there is a small place which is called the Nestor Republic, which is a part of a satellite of a Russian Federation, where there are maybe 10 divisions of armed soldiers from Russia forgotten for 25 years. So, I mean, the next step of the aggression will be Moldova with the 5th column, which is settled there. So I think all those will come to Romania. So, I mean, we have to support Romania and Poland since they are getting the highest number. I mean, this is my medical point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe if I can shortly comment. I already said a little bit about, spoke a little bit about that in the presentation. I think, well, one crucial element is how the war in Ukraine will continue, if actually it will force more people out of their homes and out of the country. And of course, from the Czech perspective, I think that, as I said, the first shock wave when the emotions and will to help it are high will naturally decline. But I think the main role to sort of do not let it go to some internal crisis is for the government, for the politicians, because I think they will partly set up what is actually the absorption line in the Czech Republic, because currently we can already see from the Ministry of Interior that he is setting up this line around 300,000 refugees. But is it a political or is it a real line? Is it a real end of our capacities? I'm not sure. I don't know. And I think that actually the country is able to accommodate more people, and you can see the still the enthusiasm in the society among the NGOs. So I think what is important for the future is for the opinion leaders and for the politicians to sort of like assure the society, the public, that we can manage this. And as long as we will be able to do it, then I think that the decline of the support will not be that steep, and actually it will stay on the necessary level. I don't think that we need 85%. It's not realistic, but if it stays above 50 or at least close to 50%, I think that would be great, and that would definitely help. And I think also the money and for the inclusion of the people who came, helping them to find the work, to find a decent accommodation, and to send people to schools is also important. And it's important to create this personal experience, I think, with the people. I think that we need to start seeing them as this gray mass of refugees. And that's something what is important again for local authorities, for civic society, for media, to show them still as people as we see them now, to be able to see them in a few months, and then I think we are on a good path, regardless how many more people will come, and I'm afraid that more will come.
Yeah, actually, I will try to address quickly the questions you mentioned, and also one comment I saw in our chat. So I think actually it's two separate questions about the perspective of war and perspective of refugee crisis in the EU. Because, the war as a military conflict and military operations, it could stop both next week and could stop both in a couple of years. It's the key of this war, the key to finish this war, it stays not in Kyiv, not even in Brussels or Washington, it stays in Moscow. So, and it's quite clear that without the change of Russian regime, none of the Ukrainians could sleep safely. Even if some ceasefire or some agreement will be reached, I don't think that today's Putin Russia, it could be a guarantee that even this agreement or ceasefire will be implemented fully. It will share the destiny of infamous Budapest Memorandum. However, if we talk about the perspectives of refugee and humanitarian crisis, I think that we could feel more clear and more confident with different simulations, because we already saw the development of the war conflicts and refugee crisis when Russia was engaged. Why I mentioned where Russia was engaged, not all the military conflict, because in comparison to Western countries, because everybody knows that Russia is not the only country which started the unjust and unprovoked war during the last decades. However, Western countries, in comparison to Russia, they do not implement something like missiles-driven deportation. So, destroyment of civic infrastructure by purpose, simply to push thousands of people to leave their houses and to run, preferably to the neighbor countries and preferably to the EU countries, to additionally destabilize the internal political situation in these countries. And here we have the case of Syria, where during Syrian war, almost half of Syrian population was pushed to leave its own houses. Half of this half, so 25% of Syrians, were pushed to go abroad. Today, as we see Ukrainian situation, and we see extremely harsh military operation just in the eastern and southern part and northern part of the country, not on the whole territory, we know that already every fourth, so 10 million of Ukrainians left their houses, and 3 million of them crossed western borders and borders with Moldova. If we will project Syrian estimations on this Ukrainian situation, we could assume that if Russia will go further with destroys of civic infrastructure, with artillery, with missiles attack, we could expect even 20 million of Ukrainians will leave their houses, and even 5 to 6 million of Ukrainians will be pushed to find the self-asylum in the EU. So here is the perspectives. I saw a comment in the chat that none of the government would be prepared for such kind of the development of events. On the one hand, the answer is yes. We couldn't expect a month ago, on the February 22nd, that 2 million Ukrainians will come to Poland during just a month. However, we could assume different scenarios of how we should perform with large numbers of people who will flee the war zone. And here I should recall the episode when during the first 2 weeks of Russian invasion, the fact Polish authorities were the most proud to when talk to CNN, Al Jazeera or BBC that, look, in comparison with our German neighbors who were pushed to open refugee centers and crisis intervention centers in 2013, Poland is a country without any refugee camp. Just our brave citizens host all these people who came. So refugee camps is for very unhospitable nations. We are better than this. This attitude is so naive, it's so unpragmatic, and as we see today, that during 3 or 4 nights, a lot of Ukrainians are forced to spend nights at railway stations in Krakow or in Warsaw. There is nothing good of not having refugee camps. The same. How many, even before the Russian attack, American and British embassy already opened their reception center for their citizens of Polish-Ukrainian border. How many reception centers were opened by Polish side, Polish-Ukrainian border these days? I will say no one, 0. So, of course, we cannot predict the concrete numbers. Of course, we cannot predict the concrete worst and best scenarios. However, we have quite a large number of works issued with really brilliant international scientists. We have a large number of UN reports. How to deal with irregular migration, how to track irregular migration, what are the possible scenarios, which facilities should be opened, which governmental and non-governmental authorities could be responsible for what. So there is basically no need to invent the bicycle one more time. However, I have such kind of a feeling that Polish government, even with good attention, sometimes wants to invent this bicycle once more.
Thank you very much. I think we just maybe for Mr. Wojciech Pitkowski, very short question, if you can.
Yes, I would like to ask all the. I learned a lot of data. So thank you once more, and very brief as to other speakers, especially to the colleague from Czech Republic, Poland, and Romania. If you have any data on a COVID in the refugees, please let me know by email. My email is tropicteam@gmail.com, because we don't see a lot of COVID here. There was a fear in the media and of the migrant societies that those guys are bringing us COVID and TB. And we did a screening at the border for 3 weeks, and we see less than 5%. And in Slovakia, we have more than 50% positivity for COVID now, and I have seen only one case of TB. So if you see, especially in at the Polish and the Romanian border, any outbreak of TB or any outbreak of COVID, this will help me tremendously. Since for last 30 years, I have not seen any big outbreak in Europe during the armed conflict. We have seen outbreaks of cholera in Rwanda and in Haiti and in Yemen, but we never seen any real outbreak in Bosnia or in Stepanakert in Karabakh or now. So this will help me a lot. So thank you once more.
Thank you very much, and I will share your email to the other participant. I think it's already done, I think. And I just want to give the floor very shortly to Wojciech Pitkowski. Sorry. Yes.
D'abord, je vais remercier Madame Babakova. I want to thank you, Madame Babakova, for your very good analysis of the Polish government attitude while this crisis at first. Secondly, I'm in France. In France, we have the President Macron promised around 100,000 places for the refugees. For the moment, there are not more as 30,000, and they arrive, as in Poland, by the family lives, by the family connections with Poles living in France, because the Ukrainian in France, there's the diaspora, the Ukrainian diaspora isn't as numerous as Polish one, and this is the same situation. It means the administration, state administration or local administration do nothing. I live in a little town of 20,000 inhabitants. There is the information, the line, the reception of Ukrainian in France. That's all. And everything I try to do is to connect by the personal connections. And our group, the Association for the Defense of the Democracy in Poland, to organize something. But we have to do everything by ourselves, because the state administration, like in Poland, is not prepared to this situation. So if you this is the same situation like in Poland, but they are only about 20,000, 30,000. We even don't know how many they are the Ukrainians in Paris. And a lot on the railway station in Paris, there is on the reception for there is a point of reception for Ukrainians. There are more staff of reception as Ukrainians in front of the reception. So everything is done by the social society, by the society in France, and the little associations who are in Paris, which are in Paris and other big towns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you want to answer, each of you, maybe if you have any answer to or some comments to add. No.
I just could address quickly what Wojciech said. Thank you for this comment and thank you for the information you add. As I said, you cannot be well prepared for 2 million people crossing the border during 1 month. However, after 4 weeks, at least at this reception center, you could disseminate such kind of questionnaire that, dear sir, dear madam, you have relatives, friends, and you want to stay in Poland. You do not have relatives and friends, but you want to stay in Poland. You consider rather to stay in Poland or to move further, you are definitely agreed to move further. This way, Polish government, the Polish local authorities could easily, at least to assess the numbers of people at big refugee reception center who are eligible to be relocated, voluntarily relocated to other EU countries. Spain also declared that it has 100,000 of places where it could host the refugees. For instance, such countries of Ireland, Finland, and Italy already declared that they could even let people without international travel document to board the plane and to travel safely by air to their countries to find safe refuge there. And here we come to the issue of the dissemination of information. To give people some cards with basic knowledge or to open the general phone line, of course, it's a pros. However, you still need hundreds of people who could serve as consultants and the very first-hand information who could come to this reception center and who could explain every person his or her state of affairs, his or her perspectives in Poland, his or her perspectives if relocated to the other EU country, the perspectives in terms of receiving some social aid and something like that. It's the work which was performed during the last decade by Polish NGOs, but today the number of newcomers is much more than NGOs' capacity. And here we come that, of course, we have so-called simple situation where it is clear that people is eligible to use the opportunities given by this temporal protection. And next question. However, we have a large number of complicated situations with the life circumstances of people who cross the border are much more complicated than the law predicts. So we have a large number of people with a really good background in law, with a really good background in how different administrative bodies in Poland and other EU countries work. And we cannot expect that such kind of high qualified job will be performed just by volunteers. So at some moment, as seen from the state point of view, at some moment you need to pay. But we see, as at least as I track Polish discussion, that it still is perceived that a lot of part of job will be done by volunteers, and we will pay nothing or we will pay less. However, as we see up from today, it's impossible.
Thank you very much, Olena. If there is no other intervention, I just want to thank you very much and very warmly to have participated to this webinar.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.